Hello, welcome to this short introduction to Light Fantasy Solo. These are solo rules written as a little supplement to Bare Bones Fantasy by DWD Studios. So what you get is an introduction to what solo play is and the broad principles of how it works, um, and a little bit of history I think is in there. And then we get straight into kind of the logistics of it. Now, scenes are a way of breaking up your solo games into manageable blocks. If you're someone that really likes to prep and all the things surrounding the play, making NPCs, building locations, you can literally play a scene or a couple of scenes, stop, and then do all of that kind of GM centric kind of supporting work. Alternatively, you can just run through many scenes and then do any kind of game maintenance at the end. You can work them how you like. I have dropped in some little tips to help, and there's this little section on rewards. Now, Bare Bones Fantasy deals with character rewards, basically experience, on a session by session basis. Because solo playing for several hours is really quite draining. Because you are both the GM and the player, and you're having to do a lot of improvisation along the way. People do generally play for shorter sessions, and one of the strengths of solo is the fact that you could play for 15 minutes if you wanted, where you wouldn't try and bring a group together just to play for 15 minutes. So rewards are dealt with on a scene by scene level, and if a scene, if you survived a life-threatening challenge, then you gain the reward for that. So yeah, you can just evaluate each scene and then see if you deserve any rewards. Now, I do touch on derailed scenes here and explain what they are, but we'll come up against those again in a second. I now get into questions, and there are broadly two types of question, which can be summarised as, say, is the chest locked and what's in the chest? The first one is basically a yes-no situation. The second one is a completely open, anything could be in. So I deal with yes-no questions first of all because they're probably the single most important tool in solo, and you can play huge amounts of games with just the yes-no tool. So I deal with how to work them, and essentially it's a skill check from Bare Bones Fantasy. There's no table to look up. You should, well, if you can play Bare Bones Fantasy and you know how the skill system works, then you can just roll the dice, and you will see immediately from the answer whether it's yes, no, critical or whatever. This is not something that's going to keep you tied to the page. Now, I deal with a couple of other things that come up under yes no questions, and one of them is derailed scenes, which I introduced earlier. So a derailed scene is normally when you play a scene, you have a good idea of what's going to come next. If your investigation suggests that Omer the merchant is going to be a witness, then there's a very good chance that the next scene you're going to go and see Omer the witness, the merchant. It's probably going to be in his store, and you can kind of imagine how that's going to be. You're going to walk into the store and you're going to want to ask him questions. You know roughly what's going to happen. A derailed scene turns around and says, no, that's not what happens. Something happens between when you leave where you are now and when you arrive at Omer's store, and you can. There's degrees of severity. It could be a good derailment. It could be a bad one. It could be someone runs up to you and says, "Oh, the chief of the watch wants to see you." So you never get to Omer's, or at that point, you are prompted to create another scene that sits in between them. So it's no longer linear based upon what you were expecting, and that's a lot. A lot of solo comes down to the dice throwing up unexpected answers. Derailed scene is a form of that, which isn't necessarily character driven. It's not you saying, is that chest locked? Are there guards on the door? You roll for them in between the scenes, in the cut scenes, while the camera is faded to black. So I deal with those. Now, the open questions are ones which can't be answered yes or no. And the core of it is you're rolling for 2 prompt words and putting them together to form an idea, which once you've got the context of the adventure and the scene and your expectations, these otherwise generic words obtain some meaning. Now, the words I've used are, some of them have come from sort of tarot interpretations. So rolling here is on a par with turning over tarot cards to derive some kind of meaning. But I've also inserted bare bones fantasy specific words. So I looked at some key recurring ideas from the core rules, and I've inserted words that suggest those into the word tables. Now, normally you roll for there's 2 D100 tables, and you roll for 1 word on each. But I've also provided you with 3 variations, which you can try them all out and see which one works best with the way your mind works and your imagination. So here are the tables. You see they're D100 tables, and you've got the 2 parts, and you can put them together. Now, I talk about how to build adventures so you don't know what's going to happen next, which is another criticism often thrown at solo, is how can you possibly not know what's going to happen next if you're the person making it all up. So I'll give you some guidance on that. Now, the core rules has a kind of adventure builder designed for the game master, but that then comes with spoilers. So what you can do is tweak when and how you roll on those tables, and you look at let it prompt other questions. So you can use the open question tool to fill in blanks as your character is confronted with a particular challenge. When you solve one thing, it opens up something else. So I'll go through that, and there's a few more tips in there. And then there's something called drama. And the idea is with these, is if you've got an event which may or may not happen, there could be 30 guards. You don't want to be rolling observation checks for 30 guards as you sneak around. So you can make something you've done being discovered. It could be a door you forced, a lock you've broken, a fence you climbed over, maybe something you killed and stashed the body. There is a chance that will be discovered, and you make a single roll, and it encompasses all of the guards and their activities. So you can, depending on how good the guards are, you make it more likely or less likely. Then your elite, royal bodyguards are going to be really on the ball. Some badly paid mercenaries, not so much. But you can use it for anything. If you're fighting on a burning bridge and you want to know whether it collapses, you can give that a chance as well. And you reduce all these things to a single roll for each kind of potential event. And it may or may not happen. So again, it's pushing it out of your control. Now, I talk about game notes because I've kind of evolved this method using Cornell note-taking to tweaking it for solo play, and I found it's kind of method that works quite well, and so I introduced that and how to use it, and there's a little bit about plots and side quests, and then this last section is I've been doing a video series for a few months now based on just solo tips, short solo tips, ideas to introduce to your game, to improve the game, to avoid problems. And what I've done is some which I thought really spoke to Bare Bones Fantasy and I was relying on when I was playtesting. I've put them into the back here, and you've got 3 pages of tips which I thought works quite well with Solo Fantasy. So that's it. That's what you get. Now, that was the PDF. This is the physical book. It's print on demand through DriveThruRPG. The only actual page you would need is those are the D100 tables. I purposely didn't create tables unnecessarily, and you can go dip into the book. Now, something you'll notice is there's, well, you see it on the PDF, there's virtually no art in the book because this is not the kind of book you're going to have as a coffee table book. The pictures, it's not an adventure, so they're not going to show you what an NPC looks like. They're not going to illuminate a location. So all it would do would be making the book bigger, which would just make it more expensive, and so it doesn't actually help you as a player. There is just the one page which you can photocopy it, you can do whatever you want to it, but it's small enough that if you wanted to just dip into those tips, then you can. Okay, so that's it. That's the PDF and the physical book. Okay, thank you for watching.